Well, welcome everyone to Women on Wealth. And today our focus is an important one for so many students and parents, and maybe even grandparents, which is addressing education reform. And the latest figure that I saw is that our student debt number in the nation here today is just under 2 trillion. We've gotten to the point even that our administration is currently proposing student loan forgiveness on a national level. And I believe they've already canceled about 11 billion to certain individuals. So what I want to do today is actually approach it from a different angle, and where the attention is not being focused so much are on certain reforms that individual institutions are enacting. So I am so excited to have today with me President Brian Casey from Colgate University, which is a New York-based private liberal arts college. And I'm also proud to be a graduate of Colgate. I was just up there for my 25-year reunion. I can't believe I'm saying that. And I was fortunate to hear Brian speak a couple of times on all of the sweeping changes that this university is doing. So first, I can't thank you enough having you on today.
I'm honored to be here, particularly with a graduate. Come on, this is terrific.
Well, before we get into all of this, I want to briefly go through your background. So you were a varsity swimmer at Notre Dame. You attended Stanford Law, practiced for several years. Then you went to Harvard for your PhD. You joined the administration at Brown. You went back to Harvard as an associate dean, and then you were president at DePauw. Do I have that right?
You have that right.
I mean, for most people, that would be the end.
Doesn't seem to be. I seem to spend my time on campuses, so that's what I do.
Well, we love it so far. So after all of this experience, you come to Colgate in 2016, I believe.
Yes.
As the 17th president, and is that right?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I have to first ask, what enticed you to come to Colgate? Because candidly, it's in the middle of nowhere.
Well, fortunately, I was coming from a little village in Indiana, so I was coming from nowhere. So I was used to nowhere. A couple things. I mean, people know Colgate. You know, I've always known about Colgate, and I believe in liberal arts colleges. And no one believes this, but I'm going to tell you this. I was in Indiana, and by the way, I was at Harvard, and I got a phone call saying at 42, do you want to try being a college president at this wonderful liberal arts college? And I did it, and I loved it, but I knew I didn't want to, I wasn't going to retire in Indiana at this school. So I took a little bit of a personal retreat, and I wrote down what I could imagine the next job being. And no one believes me, but I tell you the truth, I wrote down president of Colgate.
Really?
I did. And I have a sister from Los Angeles who's like, well, you manifested it. That's why it happened. So
amazing.
It's a perfect school for me. And let's be frank. Sometimes you have to say, what's the right place for me to do my work? You know, not just, you know, what's the next prestigious place, but what's the place that my talent set might meet this place's needs.
Sure.
I love smaller colleges. I love living on a campus. I love walking around a campus and getting to know the students. I have a rescue dog, and every night I walk at the campus and I get to talk to everybody. And I believe in liberal arts colleges. So I also, you mentioned I was an athlete at Notre Dame. Colgate is one of the very few liberal arts colleges that's Division I in athletics.
Very proud of it.
Very proud of it. And I love college athletics. So all of a sudden they called. There's one wrinkle to the story. I grew up in New Jersey, and my high school would send students up to Colgate. And two of my very, very, very best friends from high school went to Colgate. They, by the way, still think this is the funniest thing they've ever heard, that I'm the president of their alma mater. So I won't tell you their names, but because they threatened to tell the trustees of all the stupid things I did in high school. But again, the opportunity they literally presented itself. And here was this school that had this reputation, but I also thought it needed some sharpening. It needed a vision. It needed some energy. And it needed someone to say, we're here, but we're going there. And I think that's one of your jobs as a leader, is to say, here's where we're going. And I thought, this is a place that could use some of that. So, and it happened.
And we're thrilled that it happened. And I know we're going to talk about all of these changes and the changes going forward. But even when you joined in 2016, you talk about transformation at that time. Can you talk a little bit about what you kind of came into?
You know, I remember maybe, you know, what there's transformation on so many levels, but I just thought it was an institution that wasn't being bold about what it's about. And I think, you know, so many schools suffer from this. We're not the Ivy League, we're not this. And it sort of, it makes you think, oh, we're supposed to be something else. And I remember thinking my job was to say, no, you're an amazing place. And our job is to say, we're going to do what we do at the highest possible level. We're going to attract the best faculty we can. We're going to build this campus in the best ways possible. We're going to think about how our students live. We're going to make athletics stronger. We're going to attract, we're going to try to attract really great students. And so the transformation was more a call to own what we are and just have a strategy of excellence, which sounds like a Harvard Business Review article, but it actually is. It is a way to think about it.
And I think it's a great foundation for all of the transformation that's going on now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you fast forward now to the last couple of years, and Colgate has received a lot of media attention, and sports is part of it, which is fantastic.
Right.
But the other part of it was how the school handled the pandemic, and there was a lot of attention on you as well. If you can talk a little bit about all of the unique things that the school did.
Oh my. It felt like 20 years, but it was only 2. And it's still not over. No, what we like every other college and university went remote in March of 2020. And then we were trying to figure out what to do. And it was the summer of 2020, and we had a task force to figure out what to do. And we were, should we open, should we close, should we open, we close? And I've spoken about this on campus, but a young sociology professor, she was on this task force, and I'll remember this moment the rest of my life. We were really tied up in knots about what to do, yes or no, yes or no. And she just said, we are asking the wrong question. And by the way, this is an untenured young faculty member, and I was like, oh, that's bold. So right. she says, the question is should we open? The question is, we should be open. The question is, how do we do that?
How do we do it?
How do we do it? And so then the idea was, well, we're going to bring every one of our students back. When a lot of schools were only bringing one class back or half the students back, we're like, okay, we're going to bring them all back.
Yeah.
We're going to test them like crazy, but we're going to quarantine them all. So everyone had to come. And you know, in the beginning of the pandemic, we didn't know how long quarantines really ought to be.
Right. So no one did.
No one did. We certainly didn't. So we said everyone has to come and go to your room for 17 days. And because that allowed us to do 3 testing cycles. And we were going to feed them all. We were going to deliver them their food. But you had to go to your rooms. And I remember when we announced this, I said, I'll do it too. I'll move into a dorm.
Insane.
You know what? Insane, but insanely great.
Yeah.
It was, you know, after your first round, I forget the dates anymore, I've been blanking it out, but you were allowed to move around your floor. Right. And then after your second test, you could move about your dorm, the entire building. So.
And can I clarify, your quarantine was not in your own home. It was in a freshman dorm.
I moved into the oldest, most un-air conditioned dorm. I know, because people we have some.
I lived there freshman year. Yes.
We have some very nice new dorms, and I thought if I went there with air conditioning, it wouldn't count. So I moved into, you know this, it's West Hall, the oldest, most traditional dorm. Now I had my own bathroom. The dean of the college gave me a room with my own bathroom.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, thank you, Dean.
But the food was delivered, just like everyone else.
Food was delivered. You would get a text from the deliverer saying, you're allowed to go to the common room during this period to pick up your box dinner.
Wow.
And then you would go and then in the little bag with your box dinner was like a horrible bagel for breakfast the next morning. So you picked up your dinner and your breakfast.
Wow.
But I would tell you, when I look back on my life, what a great moment to like, and this sounds so horrible to say, to lead.
Right.
And I think it meant something to the students that I was doing it with them.
Absolutely. I would also suggest it meant something to the alumni.
The alumni, they really liked it. And CNN started covering the fact that I was in a dorm, and I mentioned on CNN that the reporter said, "What do you miss?" I said, "I miss my dog and bourbon." Over the next week, 48 bottles of bourbon.
Oh my God.
were delivered to my room. Because I do like bourbon, but not that much.
Yeah.
I don't remember the second week of my
Wow.
no, but I think there's moments when you can say we're in a crisis,
Yeah.
and we're all in this together, and I'm going to lead with a type of humility. But again, I have to say it was really, really, I didn't like living in a 9 by 11 foot room, but once you can move around the dorms, these kids were great.
Yeah.
And we had like floor meetings. Of course, I went to the floor meeting. It was fun.
Oh, it's an amazing story. And I so much respect for that from everyone. So, and despite all of this and all of these decisions that the school made on handling thousands of students, and I know there was a cost to this as well, right?
Yes.
In fact, my understanding is Colgate bought a hotel in the pandemic.
Yes.
Right. And can you just quickly talk about that? Because there's so much that's involved here.
Yeah, there was a 100-bed kind of modestly priced hotel outside the village, and we bought it. And because we knew we needed quarantine space. So if any students tested positive, we had to have a place to bring them. The cost of the food delivery, the cost of all the modifications.
Testing, there was testing done in the water, correct?
Yeah, we were one of the few places that decided we tested the wastewater. We had biology faculty members literally going into the sewer systems and testing water, because the virus was revealing itself through wastewater first. So whenever a dorm got hot, like, wait, we're seeing some activity, we would test every student that day.
Wow.
And
I'm sure that's a responsibility they never thought they'd have to do.
I know, right? I don't know who had it worse, me being in a dorm room or them testing wastewater. But yeah, so it was expensive. What was terrific, though, and you know this from Alumni Weekend, we just sent letters. We said to the alumni, we stayed open. It cost us $4 million, and we need you to pay for it. And the alumni did. Like, within days, we said, our mission is to stay open, help us. Boom.
Wow.
Because I think, people will give to things that are meaningful. People want clarity, they want effect, and they want leadership, and they want, people want to be part of something bigger than themselves.
For sure.
So I had more alums tell me, I've never gotten to the university, but this is the happiest check I ever wrote. Here's $100. And so I wrote back to every alum who wrote. So it was
wow.
But great. So the pandemic proved to be, again, I don't want to do it again. I wish we were through it, but I think if you go back to your mission, what's our mission? What's our mission? If you keep coming back to it, the answers become easier. I mean, not easier, clearer. Yeah.
Well, and as if all this wasn't enough, you were also moving forward with what was announced to be the Colgate Commitment.
Yes.
And can you talk about that and the financing around it?
Sure. The part of your question was why, for God's sakes, in the middle of the pandemic, were you doing strategic planning and announcing a major financial initiative? Because sometimes when things are really bad in the present, the things you do is keep focused on the future. And actually the energy of, we would have meetings where we said, we are not going to speak about COVID during this meeting. We would make pledges to each other. And this was a meeting where we talked about financial aid. We were doing all this analysis, and we were looking at what students were coming to Colgate and what students weren't. And we were measuring students that we admitted, but we weren't yielding. They weren't coming back. And it was an unbelievably interesting curve as you looked at it. Students who were coming from families with incomes of up to $100,000 were kind of yielding at very nice levels. Once you got past $100,000, the bottom dropped out. It really, like literally, in some income brands, less than 10% of the students that we wanted, that we admitted, were coming. Once you get sort of closer to $200,000, it came back, because these.
Yeah.
And we realized, so we just asked those students who didn't come, and it was the debt. And what we learned is that students below 85,000, there's so many different federal grants and other grants that they can really make it work. I'm not saying it's easy for them, but there's avenues that they have.
Sure.
Once you get past a certain income level, we call them the kitchen table families versus the announcement families. A kitchen table family is a kid is like, I've been admitted to these 5 schools. The family will sit down at the kitchen table, look at all the debt and the financial aid packages. And most of those families view this as a family decision, because if kid number 1 is going to go to a place and take on this much debt, that means kid 2 and 3 can't.
Right.
So it's a kitchen table decision. And we learned right away that if you are putting debt, and the family view this as our family is taking on debt.
Right.
It was over. It was over. So right? Versus the other families are, once you get a certain income, it's the pronouncement family, where the kid comes down and goes, I've been admitted to these 4 schools, but I'm going to X, and everyone's happy because they know they can pay for it. But so we thought, we're losing the kitchen table families.
Wow.
Right. And these are the children of high school principals. Right. These are people who work for the state government. And I thought, we can't lose these kids.
Right.
We have to get them. We have to get those kids. And so then became this mantra, we have to get them. So we said, we think it's going to cost an additional financial aid in the operating budget. We have to put a quick $3.5 million into the financial aid budget. And I said, how much of it can we find in our operating budget?
Right.
And how much can we just ask our alumni to do this? And so it's so funny, because I kept saying I would go to these alumni events or Zoom meetings, and I'd say, we're going to try to take away student debt. And people would clap. And I'd say, oh, stop clapping. You're paying for this. But so I said, I need current use dollars. I need in the operating budget. So if people give annually to the university, again, the theme is I ask for money is sort of coming back, but I said, help us do this. Again, I think because we were clear, we were saying, we're taking away loans from middle-class kids.
Right.
People are like, I get that.
Absolutely.
That's clear to me. Here's a check. And we could write back to them and say, so 800 students. Okay, I'll back up a bit. We were going to just say to the incoming first-year class, your loans are taken away. But we were raising so much money, we got to say to the sophomores, juniors, and seniors, we're going to take your loans away. They just disappeared.
And my understanding is you started with a limit, but raised it even higher, correct?
We did. We said first we were going to say, only for those families up to 150,000, we'll take it away. And then we were like, let's raise it to 175. So I said this at an alumni event. So we got to send out an email to 838 students. Dear returning sophomore, dear, your financial aid letter that you got sent is actually wrong. The loan is now being replaced by a grant from the university. And by the way, I've met a lot of these students, and I always say to them, well, you owe this to the world.
Right. That's amazing. And I also think you had some interesting reactions from this email that you sent out from those 839 students or whatever.
I had one student send me a letter asking me whether I was actually kidding, like it was a joke. And I remember thinking, no. But it was, it's interesting. You talk about women and finances and philanthropy. So I actually had a group of women at the house. And it turns out it was a group of women for whom these loans had just vanished from their package. And I said the same thing. I go, you're going to have to pay this back, not to necessarily the Colgate, but when you like give it to your church, give it to your community, give it to your grade school. But if you just all of a sudden had $14,000 of loans, I go, sometime when you're 50, and they all laugh, like, we'll never be 50. I'm like, okay, yeah, you will. But I said, you're going to write a check for that $14,000 and you're going to feel great. And they go, no, we won't. I go, no, trust me. You're going to feel great, right? And I think, and maybe your theme about women, I think particularly these young women, I said to them, you're going to write this check and you're going to do this. And I'm not sure people speak to women at 20 about when you have the opportunity to be philanthropic when you're 50.
Absolutely.
No one speaks to them about that.
No.
Right?
Absolutely not. Yeah.
So I remember part of the conversation was, wait, I'm going to be writing checks to things when I'm 50. And I'm like, you're good. Yes.
Oh, yes.
Oh, lots of them. Lots and lots of them. Tuition. And so anyway, but so that's whole endeavor was great. And then maybe we'll talk about it, but then applications exploded.
And I think, actually continue if you can. The applications exploded, if you can clarify that a little bit.
So Colgate, like many liberal arts colleges, Williams, Amherst, Swarthmore, we get about 9,000 applications a year. Very typical of an elite liberal arts college. You get that, you admit a certain percent. So all of a sudden during the pandemic year, it popped up to 17,000 applications. And then we announced the Colgate Commitment and it moved up to 23,000 applications to the university. Unbelievable. And we're testing it now. Like, was it the COVID response? Was it the basketball team making the March Madness? But it's very clear that taking the loans away is a massive driver.
Sure.
And we thought we would have 750 students in the first year class that's going to show up in 3 weeks or 4 weeks. We thought we'd get 750. And we only admitted 12% of the class, thinking that would get us 750 students. Well, we're about to welcome 840 of them. And we over-enrolled with those students from families at 110,000. All our models show that that's the delta.
That's the result.
That's the result.
Yeah. Wow.
So all I know is that in a few weeks when I welcome this class, I can look out and think there's about 100 of you who are your dad's a civil servant, your mom's a high school principal, and that you're here because of that.
Yeah.
And I love you. I won't know who they are.
Yeah.
But they're there.
They're there.
They're there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I'll kill for them.
Right. Well, I remember you saying in such a sincere form at reunion that was one of the best days of your life when you sent that email out.
Yes.
Right.
Best day of my life. And I will say this at one of these dinners particularly with these women, and I said, how would your college, she was a senior, how would your college years have been different had you not had these loans? And she really kind of struggled to find the right word. And she said, oh, I would have been bolder.
Mm.
So I immediately told her, well, you're only 20 years old. Please be bold in your life.
Right.
But this notion that the weight of the debt on her and her family had impeded her or restrained
sure.
her, it's really kind of heartbreaking.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And so, when you're doing this, do you know if other universities are following suit? How do you think of it from a larger scale?
We're starting to see these moves to take away loans. Harvard, Yale, and Princeton have moved. Now, they have tens of billions of dollars in endowment. And
their endowment's a little bigger, but
a little bit bigger. And you say to them, you should have done this a long time ago. In our space, we've now seen Williams College and Colby make similar moves. And look, to be frank, they saw our applications explode. You know, and it doesn't
all watch each other.
Well, we all watch each other very closely. And people are like, well, shouldn't they have just been motivated by altruism? Sure. But if you have the resources, and look, I'm incredibly lucky. We have $1.5 billion in endowment for our little school. I have an alumni base where I can say to them, I need money now, and they respond. So does Williams. So does Dartmouth.
Sure.
They ought to do this. They ought to do it. And look, what was it a strain on our operating budget? Yes, but you're an alum. When you heard about this, you got excited. Absolutely. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
More than excited. I came after you at the chapel. I'm like, you have to be on my podcast.
Again, given how kind of horrible everything is in the world, you know, the world's on fire, the president has COVID, you know, like everything is. If people can feel something they're affiliated with doing something worthwhile, people want to be connected to good things, and this feels like a good thing. And you surely reacted to, so I can say 800 students are now walking around this campus without the burden of debt. They're going to become doctors. They're going to become community leaders. They're going to become bold people, and or take more risks.
It's amazing to think about the implications. Yeah. So, and let's take it one step further.
Yes.
This is enough for most schools, but you also just launched the Third Century Plan.
Yes.
Which is, I believe, it's going to be the largest ever raised by a liberal arts college that you're looking to raise. And there's a lot of facets to this, if you can explain it.
Yeah. So the campaign is, yes, we're seeking $1 billion.
$1 billion.
$1 billion. We're going to launch 3 important academic initiatives. One, the study of the brain. The other is a real investment in arts, creativity, innovation, and technology. And the third is policy, you know, how you take the things we learn and apply it in the world. How do we make people apply things? We're going to completely rebuild how our students live, because I want them to live with each other. The tendency in most institutions, you see students moving further and further away from each other, living in singles, living farther and farther away.
Like off the quad kind of thing.
Off the quad.
Yeah.
And most institutions, when you see new residence halls, singles, hotel suite types, far away, I want my own kitchen. I want us all to live with each other and learn how to be with each other. So we're going to rebuild our residence halls.
Wow.
We're going to keep going on financial aid. And then we're going to hire at least 25 or 30 new young faculty members who I hopefully are not stuck in particular departments, who are just thinkers. So yeah, so that's what we did during the pandemic. We just kept adding more things to and now the question is, you know, will the alumni and other friends support this? And so far the data says yes.
Okay.
Data says yes.
I think it's amazing. And do you sleep at all?
I do. No, it's so funny. I get that question. People always say, what do you eat? I'm always like, why is that a question?
Yeah.
I do. What I do is a couple things. I make a promise to myself that I tear myself away from emails and the computer. I will not work unless I have to because of some event or something. But I try to turn away at 9. By 9 o'clock, I'm done, and I read.
Okay.
You read.
What do you read?
Most of the time in the evenings, I'll read fiction just to get my brain away.
Decompress.
Yeah, I'm very proud of myself. I just read War and Peace this summer.
Oh wow!
You know, someone on NPR said you can't really understand the Russians unless you read Tolstoy.
Okay.
So I thought, well, I'll read War and Peace to help me understand and it really does. It helps.
Huh.
And then the other thing I do is I swim every morning.
You still swim? You run an amazing facility.
I do. And what's really funny is during the pandemic, once I was sprung from my dorm room, most of the athletic facilities were all closed because of the pandemic, but I did let myself into the pool.
Oh, there you go. Good.
Yeah. And my athletic director is always like, "You're going to die." I'm like, "No, I think I'm fine." I swam in Notre Dame, but the swimming in the morning and the reading but the other thing is, I tell you, when I walk at night with a dog on a campus and I'm surrounded by 19, 20, 21-year-olds who are, they're 19 and they're anxious about their lives. They're excited about their lives.
Yeah.
The stakes seem so high to them.
Yes.
Right. And
I remember.
yeah. And they're like, I have to choose a major. My entire life is going to be changed by my major.
Yeah.
And you want to say, no, it isn't. But you realize the stakes are high.
Yeah. Why can't I bring my car up the hill? Why do I have to park it so far away?
Why do I have to park? I'm like, The other thing I love this too is they'll come up to me and they'll say, "President Casey, do you know what the administration's up to?" And they'll tell me like, and I want to say to them, "You do know I'm the administration," but they think of me as being sort of like Santa Claus in their lives, like this,
Right.
like this figure.
Yeah. Well, they follow you on Instagram.
They do more my dog than me.
Okay.
Yeah, my dog far more followers than me, but
yeah.
So do I sleep? There are sometimes you don't. And I will say the pandemic, we're presented as being really joyful, but it was really hard.
Sure.
And scary.
Of course.
And the fear was we brought them all back and they're going to have to leave again, and that would have been crushing.
Yeah.
For them. And I also looked at them and I thought they're not having a normal college year. They're not.
Yeah.
But they seem okay now. But it was hard. It was. I can you imagine your senior year in college being like, you can't gather more than 4 people at a time.
Right. No.
Right. Yeah. So that it was hard, but good.
Well, congratulations on how you progressed through it. And I will also say there's a great video on the website of the Third Century Plan.
Yes.
That you showed us at reunion. I'll try and put it in the show notes.
Okay,
and I'm going to put a link in there. So if anyone would like to donate, you don't have to be a Colgate alum, correct?
You don't.
So
look, I'm not a Colgate alum and I give to the university.
There you go. Absolutely. Your impact has been tremendous, not just on the students and alumni, but I hope on other educations that are looking at this as a model. And your mission and your passion are infectious. You've made that impact on me. I'm committing to do more. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And again, I think people want to be part of something bigger.
Yeah.
And I think I said this at one presentation. I get to do this. Like I get to walk around a campus and make it beautiful and help students and go to football games and.
Absolutely.
Sometimes it's hard, but a lot of times it's really great.
It's great. Well, President Casey, thank you for all of your insight, and congrats again. And we'll look for that 1 billion in the Third Century Plan.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.